Now we're going to try to develop some of our details using call-out views. Now, the idea behind a call-out view, and we talked about it a little bit earlier here when we were working on our first floor plan, is to make an enlarged area that will allow us to do a higher level of detail and drafting. But there's another kind of call-out view that we can leverage in order to be able to do such things as our wall sections. And that kind of call-out view is going to be essentially a detail view. So let's go ahead and show how that detail view can be put together. So I'm going to zoom in here, and we already have a wall section in place in this location. I'm going to double click right here on the head of the wall section in order to be able to bring up this section view. I will point out that you can always click on this line, right click, and go to view if you have a hard time double clicking on any sort of section head. So I'm just going to double click on that and zoom into our view. We can see this layer of insulation that we put in a little bit earlier on. While this has a fairly decent level of detail to it, this is still a little bit too compressed for us to be able to see each and every layer of material. So it's really not practical for the kind of application that we want to do, which is to be able to see each and every board, everything that's going to make up the structure of this building. So in order to be able to achieve that, we're going to need to add a call-out bubble and then proceed from there. Now, one thing I do want to do first before we move on is I'm going to click on this line right here, and I'm going to select this little circle and pull this out a little bit farther. I want to be able to see the end of our roof when we're going to be doing this detail. Let's go ahead and add that call-out bubble. Up here underneath View, we're going to come over and we're going to select on Call-Out. From there, we need to think about, okay, what scale do we want this view to be at? For right now, we'll leave it at 1/2 inch equals a foot. Always remember that after you've done this, you can always come down to the scale at the bottom of the screen and adjust it so it's larger or smaller, whatever you require. When we're dealing with a detail view, there are actually a couple of options that we have. Right now, if we would place it, it would become a building section and show up as a building section down here underneath our project browser. But we also have the ability to select here and tell it all of our detail views should show up underneath detail view. So anything with an enlarged amount of data and information that we can see more easily, most likely would be a detail view. And that's what I want to do in this case, a detail view. Now I'm going to draw a window around this upper portion of the wall. You can see how I'm just doing this little section of the wall right here. And I'm going to click the place. Now this is going over the top of my level here, and I don't really like the look of that. So I'm going to select on this call out, grab the little dot, and pull it up so it's no longer in the way of this word called top. Now that we've done that, you can always select on it, right click and go to view, or double click here on the circle. But I do want to point out that one of the things I changed up here was to change that to a detail view. And you can see under the project browser, we now have a new detail view. In this case, it's being called Detail 0. It should probably be renamed to something you'd recognize, but I'm just going to go ahead and double click on this for right now. And we can see a detail view showing the top of our building at the moment. If we wanted to be able to expand this out, we can always click on it, select on this little dot here and just pull it down. And you can see how we can adjust this to get as much of this part of the building as we require to complete our drafting process. Now we need to consider, all right, what goes on the inside of this wall? But one thing I want to point out first is you notice that this wall here is empty. If we come back to the view that we were in, the wall had the insulation in it. Anything that's drawn from the Annotate tab only exists in the view that you drew it in. And that includes the insulation that we drew on the inside of the wall. So when we recreated this view or enlarged this view as a detail view, it no longer showed that insulation in it. So let's go ahead and go to that detail view. Notice how the insulation isn't there anymore, but we can draw it in. In order to do that, I'm going to come up here to insulation, select on that, and I'm going to change this to be 3.5 inches of insulation. Move down here to the bottom. It'll kind of snap to the center. You can already see the blue dashed line. Click and draw it right on up. Now we have our markings for insulation. Next, let's put in a couple of boards up here. This is going to be our top plate. One of the things you may have noticed as we've been drawing this building is I kept referring to the level top. TOP, and we're really talking about up here near where the top plate is going to be located at. And I will leave that out in the next discussion. But anyway, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add the boards up here. I'm going to come in here to our components and I'm going to select on Detail Component and going to drop it in. Now you can see this is a 2x4, which just happens to be right for our construction. The only problem is right now it's on edge and we really need to tilt this thing down. So in order to be able to tilt it down, I'm going to use the space bar. And just like a lot of the other things, like the toilets and sinks and other objects, if you hit the space bar, it'll rotate the thing around. So it's facing the other direction. In this case, it's facing where we want it to go to, and I'm just going to click right here in order to be able to place it in. Next, I'm going to place another one in, just down from that. I will click right about here. It doesn't do a really pretty snap, but as long as you look at it really close, you can see you get it right on. And once you zoom out, they might as well be perfect. Now that that's in location, I'm going to add a couple of more lines. I'm going to add a line that goes over from here to here to indicate something that the ceiling might be hanging on. It also could indicate rafters going up above here. So I'm going to come up here with a detail line. I'm just going to draw it across from here, straight on across. You notice I can even go outside of the view, and it'll just stop when it gets to this outside line. If I wanted to add insulation or anything along those lines up here, I could. I'll also point out that I can draw some more of our detail lines. I can come up. I can add in more insulation if I wish. I can change the thickness of that insulation to be something that's going to fit up there more appropriately. I believe 7 1/4 inches is what we have up here. So I'll just come in, click, draw up in this direction. I can always adjust that after the fact. You can see how it automatically gets cut off. If I wanted to click on this and just pull it up, I could, so it's in the right location. So now we have some insulation up there in our rafter area. I also could have drawn it from here just across, so we would have had some sort of insulation going right across where our ceiling was at. It just comes into how you want to install it into the house. But to make a long story short on the detail work that's going on in here, you just draft on the inside of this already existing three-dimensional object in order to put in the final details. There's no reason to have all this information modeled in Revit when you can just use a few lines and keep your Revit model moving quickly. The more information you put three-dimensionally in Revit, the slower the Revit model moves. Now, I want to add one more thing to this, and it's going to be a series of notes. And underneath here, we have text. So select on text. And you'll see that we have some leader options. I'm going to pick to segment, but you can pick the one that you like the most, whether it be curved or just a straight line. And I'm going to point to a specific spot here, and it's going to be the insulation. I'm going to click, try to draw on out here. I don't want this to be 1/4 inch aerial. It's going to be 3/32 aerial. And this is going to be 3 1/2 inch R15, which is an insulation value. Bad insulation. I'm going to click over here to finish the command, and it's saying that it can't see any of those notes. Well, what's going on is that it went outside of this dash box right here, and that'll try to cut off any of those notes. But if I click on this little circle and pull it out, we'll then be able to see the notes, and they'll just show up properly. Now I'm going to select on this note and copy it straight down. Next, I'm going to select on the arrow, and I'm just going to move this up, and it's just going to be pointing directly at our wallboard here. In this case, I could call it a 1/2 inch drywall, but you can make this be whatever is appropriate for the type of construction that you're trying to accomplish. Creating these detail views are as simple as using such things as callouts, maybe even building sections, and detailing in on the inside of these already live Revit views.